Just ahead on American Black Journal, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History is offering some unique programs during Black History Month. We'll get the details plus an update on the museum's financial health. And we'll hear an inspiring story of a young Detroit man who made history at Wayne State University after overcoming a life of crime, illiteracy, and abuse. That's all coming up next, so stay with us.
Eric wants to know,
what does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs.
We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
I love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The City of Detroit's historic bankruptcy filing is leaving the future up in the air for cultural organizations that depend on the city for funding. Among them is the world's largest institution dedicated to the Black experience, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Here to talk about the museum's financial situation and the exciting events scheduled for Black History Month is the Director of Marketing and Communications, Ted Canady. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen.
So the Wright is of course, you know, just such an iconic and important institution here in Detroit. I feel like it's one that we sort of take for granted, though, here in Detroit, that people don't appreciate how special it is and literally unique.
Well, I'll say this, in my role there as marketing director, this month, everyone thinks I'm doing a great job.
That's right.
It's Black History Month. But we are open the other 11 months of the year and have vibrant
and
programming.
very busy those months. Yeah.
Very busy all throughout the year. Obviously, February is one of our busiest months, definitely our busiest month in terms of programming. And there's something taking place almost every night, every day this month. So there's a lot for people to see and do here.
Yeah. As I mentioned in the open, the bankruptcy has raised real question marks about every cultural institution we have. The Wright is more dependent on city funding than some of the other museums that we have in Detroit. Where does all that stand? I mean, there's sort of a question mark over what's going to happen there, right?
Well, there's been some media attention, some articles written by Rochelle Riley recently about that, and we're very grateful for the attention, for the outpouring of support from the community in response to that. And we, like every other cultural institution, not to mention every other nonprofit, every other corporation, there's been a bit of struggle since the beginning of the Great Recession.
Right.
You know, especially with the reliance on corporate support that all the institutions have, ourselves included. And because the Wright has not been in existence for as long as some of the other institutions, that's why we've had higher levels of city funding over the past few years. And it's important to note that the Wright Museum is owned by the city, property's owned, the collections are owned by the city, and we have an operating agreement with the City of Detroit to operate the museum through 2019. So the fact is, though, is that the funding from the City of Detroit has dropped by 63% since 2009. In response to that, we've had to cut staffing by 66%. We have reduced salaries and benefits by 33%. The staff have taken on 2 pay cuts in that time period. But at the same time, we also recognize that our standing in the community, our mission requires us to do more, to continue to do more. And that's what we do. In fact, the levels of programming, of exhibitions, and we would argue the quality of those things have improved every single year, despite that. But there is a certain point where you're feeling like you've been living on 1,300, 1,400 calories a day for a long period of time.
And to be clear, the museum would like to continue to be funded, you know, by the city at the levels that were agreed to. I mean, right now the city's giving less money than it had said it would because of the financial situation. You'd like to see the city emerge from bankruptcy with a full commitment
Certainly.
to the right.
Certainly. Really, the museum, and this is one of the things that Rochelle's columns has brought out that was probably not well understood, is that the museum has always been underfunded from an operational standpoint. Right. The city contributed 75% of the capital cost for building this magnificent building that opened in 1997. But operations have generally started being funded at about 30%. That's dropped to just above 20% now. And the museum has been successful in raising funding, in improving earned income. We've improved facility rentals, improved that by 47% since 2009, improved earned income by 29% over that same time period. But that's not enough to make up the gap.
That's not right.
And there's a really important 2007 study, financial assessment, done for the Ford Foundation that was done for all the cultural organizations, but in terms of the Wright specifically, it stated that based upon our size, based upon the amount of programming we need to provide to the community, the exhibition spaces, that the museum really needs to be a $6 to $8 million a year operation.
Right.
That doesn't mean that it has to be funded by the city for $6 to $8 million a year.
But that's what you guys need.
But we have traditionally, at least in the past 4 or 5 years, been a $5 million, $4.5 million a year operation, and that shows a dramatic gap between what we have had to work with and where we would like to be.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, and getting there is, you know, we're talking about the city contribution because that's what's in play in the bankruptcy, but we really need to be doing better about building the endowment of the museum. I mean, that's really the direction that nonprofits and cultural institutions are headed, is to have a big enough endowment to yield that operational money that you need every year, so that, and not to chew into the endowment by doing it. And you guys have not been around long enough to build that up. So you're in that limbo space where we really need people to rededicate themselves to the idea of helping to fund this.
Certainly. Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah. Let's talk about this month at the museum, which is exciting.
Yes.
Because it's Black History Month. We have some graphics to share with the viewers that will explain the things that you guys have going on. So let's start with that.
Well, here we have happening every weekend, Saturday and Sunday through February 16th, a wonderful program called American Hues. It features a storytelling performance of the off-Broadway play Passing, which is written by a local playwright, Dara Harper, and it's a one-woman, 10-character play based upon a true story of a woman who, in the late 1800s, she was light-skinned enough to pass for white, but it's about her choice in not doing that. And it's followed, each session is followed by a really insightful discussion of race and identity, and we've had black people, white people participating, and it's the type of conversation that we're told time and time again that people in the community want to be able to have, in a safe space to have that. Right. And so that's one of the wonderful things that the museum is a space to have those kinds of conversations.
Talk about those kinds of things, yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a current exhibit at the museum.
Yes, we have, well, here we have a great program coming up on, this would be February 22nd. The nationally syndicated editorialist Leonard Pitts Jr. and Pulitzer Prize winning writer, he will be giving a free lecture and discussion of his book Freeman. Same date, we have a continuation of our Liberation Film Series, which is a free monthly program where we present film screenings and discussions. This month it's with Dr. Melba Boyd from Wayne State University. And then every day, every Tuesday through Friday, I should say, at 11 a.m., there is a theatrical production called Jordan Anderson Writes a Letter, based upon the true story of someone that escaped from slavery and how they responded to their captors in treaties to come back to the South. A really wonderful production that we're doing in partnership with the University of Detroit Mercy, and that's free with admission. Actually today, this is would be on February 9th, Praise Song for Mandela. It will be a celebration of the life of the late President Mandela, featuring Dr. Gloria House and Jessica Care Moore poetry, as well as the Vision male ensemble from the Detroit School of the Arts. On the 23rd, we have a scholar, Larry S. Gibson, who will be talking about his book, Young Thurgood, the only biography of Thurgood Marshall that has been approved by his family. That's another free program on Sunday, February 23rd.
Yeah. That last exhibit, Thurgood, that has special resonance for me. I covered the Supreme Court for 5 years in Washington.
Okay. And,
of course, Justice Marshall is one of the great sort of heroes that we have, not just for African Americans, but for everybody in this country. And a fascinating guy who I feel like, as you point out, the family's only approved one biography. There isn't that much known about his personal life. And things like that. So
very true.
Stuff. And that's all of that stuff is a reminder of how important the museum is this month in particular. Not that you don't do stuff the rest of the year, but you really crank it up. For February.
And and it's very difficult for one person to remember everything going on. So we encourage people to go to the website, thewright.org. We have a full listing of events. Of course, we're also on Facebook and Twitter. But it is literally something every single day.
And you also have a current exhibit running at the museum.
We have
a video of that.
An exhibition called Point of View. It's a two-part exhibition in partnership with the Flint Institute of Arts. We are both showcasing art from the collection of Elliot and Kimberly Perry. Elliot Perry is a former NBA player who got into art collecting and has said that his passion for art now rivals his love for basketball. And we are featuring the master works, what we would consider the works from the earlier part of the 20th century, and the Flint Institute of Arts, they are showcasing the contemporary works. And the wonderful thing about this partnership is that if you purchase admission to either institution, you get a free pass to go to the other institution to see the second part of the exhibit.
Well, very good. It's always exciting what you guys are working on, and this is a great reminder that not only you have such great programming, but that we need more support for this in our community. Most of those events at the museum are free, or a lot of them are, correct?
Yes. Most are free. A lot are either free or free with museum admission, which is really quite nominal, $8 for adults, $5 for children. And of course, if you're a museum member, you have free admission for the year. So a few of the events we talked about are ticketed. I know Praise Song for Mandela is ticketed specifically because it's a fundraiser for a school for the disabled in Soweto, South Africa. But for the most part, there is a lot of free, vibrant programming, and we encourage everyone to come out.
And the building itself is just something we have to see. My kids, this is one of their favorite spaces in Detroit. So
that's great.
Great to have you here. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Just ahead on American Black Journal, we'll hear how a young Detroit man used the power of determination and education to overcome a troubled life. That's next, right after we have this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1964, Tracy Reese was born in Detroit. She went on to become a renowned New York fashion designer. In 1922, Fannie Richards, the city's first black public school teacher, died at the age of 81. And in 1970, the Reverend Charles A. Hill, longtime Hartford Avenue Baptist Church pastor, was laid to rest. He was 77 years old. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
As a teenager growing up on Detroit's east side, life was tough for Kevin Brown. He was convicted of armed robbery at the age of 17. When he emerged from prison, Kevin was inspired to use education as a way to transform his life. He tells his story in a book titled Chasing Crows, a true Detroit success story. It chronicles how he overcame the adversities in his life to eventually become class valedictorian and the first black president of the student government at Wayne State University School of Business. Joining me now is author and motivational speaker Kevin Brown.
Great to meet you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. You know, I know lots of people who write books. I know lots of people who think they should write books. You actually had a story that absolutely should be in a book. It's an amazing story of change.
Thank you, thank you. Well, it really came on my heart to write this book, because I felt that I had a story and I had an obligation to share my story with other people so they can hear it and know that regardless of where they come from, the things that they've faced in their life, that they can achieve and generate success for themselves.
Yeah, and that's really the message behind
Right.
your story.
Yes.
Is where you come from is a place that that most people would expect failure.
Yeah, you know, I grew up on the east side of Detroit. My mother worked at the post office on 4th Street. So everything about my story says and breathes and bleeds Detroit.
Detroit.
And you know, like growing up in Detroit, my mother worked midnight, so I didn't really have that connection with her. And so I was labeled illiterate as a child. I ended up failing the 3rd and 7th grades. The first time I actually tried to commit suicide, I was 8 years old. Wow. 8 years old, I tried to hang myself in my closet.
And tell me about the point at which you sort of realized that things had just gone off the tracks for you as a kid.
Well, I think as a child you really don't pay attention. Sure. And so I really realized that my life was going in a direction I didn't want it to go when I ended up in prison for committing armed robbery when I was 17. Yeah. But the ironic thing about going to prison was that prison was actually an intervention for me. It was my first time to being around somebody that's positive. How funny it sounds, I went to prison to find a mentor. And because of him, I changed my life. And my life, you know, is totally different now because of that experience in prison.
Right. You know, you say that you went to school or to prison to find a mentor, which suggests that all the other institutions that are involved in kids' lives in the city, they fail you. What
Exactly.
was going on at the school that you were attending?
Well, there was no resolve. I was bullied a lot as a kid, and I went to a teacher, and the teacher would bully me back, bully me just like the kids. And so they're the ones that labeled me illiterate. They're the ones who didn't want to take out the extra time to actually help me learn, right, and didn't understand how I learned. You know, and that's the one thing about my story, because I was labeled by society as illiterate, but now I'm writing books. Right. You know, so that's the crazy thing.
So somebody got it wrong.
Right? Somebody definitely got it wrong.
Right. At the school where you were attending, did they ever attempt to sort of intervene and say, look, this is a kid who has some potential, maybe has some problems, let's try to turn around?
No, there was no type of intervention on the school's part. And so that's something that we really need to fix in Detroit.
Sure.
We really need to take each individual child and understand how they learn and how they learn and make learning fun for them.
Right. And was it that you learned differently from the other kids? It was
the fact that I learned differently, but then it was also my exposure. I had nothing to ignite my passion. Yeah. It was just like, you know, I went to school because I was told to. But after I got out of prison, I had motivation because I was a single parent. And instead of being the type of parent that, you know, tell the children to go to school and do a good job, I wanted to show my son that regardless of what I had behind me, that I still can achieve success. So I use education as a catalyst for that.
Right. Talk to me about the day that you commit this armed robbery that sends you to prison. Talk about what was going through your mind at that point about your life.
Well, I was lost. I had no value on my life. I had no value of anybody else's life. I had no direction. I was just out there in the streets doing whatever I could do, whatever happened. It was a lot of peer pressure. It happened July 5th, 1995. And it was right after 4th of July. And just my mind wasn't right. But see, and that's why I tell my story, because I really believe if I share my story with somebody, that same person who felt like I felt at that time, right, you know, I can save them from making a great mistake.
I think that's a very common feeling among kids in Detroit, that there isn't anything else for them, and that's why they're out doing the things
right.
they're doing.
And I really believe that I can be a flagship to show them. You know, I come from DPS. Right. I come from Detroit. I rode the cheese, you know, whatever they call it. You know, I went to Denby High School. I went to Wayne State. Everything about my story lives and bleeds Detroit. So if they can see what they can become, you know, instead of seeing something on a rap video or trying to aspire to be an athlete, there are a lot of more things out there for you that you can achieve. You can be an accountant, you can be a doctor, you can be a mortician. There's a plethora of things you can do. But see, they just need someone to show them, like, you know, I can achieve. You know, people labeled me illiterate. People know I had a GED. I got my GED in prison. I didn't, but that didn't matter.
Right.
I went to school. When I graduated from Wayne State, I was the first black person to ever be president of the student government for the School of Business. I was one of the top business students in Michigan. I was the valedictorian, and I got my MBA in 2010. There's nothing that you cannot do as long as you have that drive and willingness.
And the control that you have over your life now, which you didn't have then or didn't feel like you had then, that's the thing that I feel like most people don't understand, that you can control
exactly
what you're doing and where you're headed.
Exactly. You have control over your destiny. You have control over your options and your decisions. I mean, as long as you find something that you're willing to die for. Willing to die for, because when you say you're willing to die for something, there's no such thing as you're too tired.
Right.
You know, there's no such thing as you're too hungry.
Right.
You know, whatever it takes to achieve that, you know, you would do it. And that's what people have to understand. There's more than life than what you see, and that's why I try to show kids in Detroit.
Yeah. I imagine that when you showed up at Wayne State, you sort of had a little bit of a disconnect maybe with some of the other kids. They would not have been from the same place that you were.
That was intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But, you know, I knew what I had in front of me. You know, it was more than just going to school. It was like I had my son on my shoulders, and that's what I thought about. So when it got hard, I thought about having my son on my shoulders. It didn't matter if I didn't fit in. You know, whatever I had to do to fit in, I did. And I excelled very well at it.
Yeah.
You know, people wouldn't even believe my past. They wouldn't believe it.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
And you know, as you said, you came to be a leader among the kids at that school.
Exactly, and that was crazy.
That's the irony, right?
Yeah, because I was literally like the only black person there.
Right. So not only do you have the background, you're the only African American.
Yes.
Among these students, but they chose you as their
leader, their leader and their president, and we did very well that year. I mean, I think the enrollment went up. I mean, I was literally the billboard for the School of Business. You know, when they wanted to show their student body, I would go to these big events. Nobody knew I had a criminal history, you know, but, you know, it didn't matter because I changed myself for a purpose. I changed myself for a reason. And that's all I see, that's all I saw. Was I just wanted it so bad that it didn't matter what I had to go through to get it.
Yeah. You talked about the person in prison who you felt like was your first mentor. But of course, you know, as you go through life, there are lots of people who help us along. And I always feel like we're all standing on the shoulders of 3 or 4 other people who helped lift us up. Who are some of the other people who you feel like really helped you get to a better place?
It's funny how it seems like God puts people in your path for a reason. And so, of course, my foundation was my son. And that was my motivation. Right. He gave me my motivation. But along the way, there were my Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, Dr. Beverly Y. Jackson. They're you know, people who motivate me. My mentor, who actually wanted me to become president, because I was hesitant. The opportunity was there, and I'm like, they're not going to elect me. I'm like, you know, that's the negativity in me. But then, because of him, his name is John Davis, and he encouraged me to do it. And then, you know, so it's a group of people. It's a group of people. So my success isn't just me. My success represents a community.
All of those people.
It's a community. It's a hub of people who believed in me. I mean, the people that's here today, they believe in me. You know, and that's where the success comes from.
Right.
You know, so my story isn't just my story. My story is the story of a community that had the courage and the faith in me to build me up and put me on the pedestal where I can do well.
So now you have the book, but you're also out speaking. Tell me about the reaction you get from
it's crazy.
Young people in particular.
The reaction I get is crazy because I go into juvenile institution. Now these are supposed to be the worst kids in Detroit by far. And when they hear my story, you see their eyes light up. And you see the child in them. And they start to share their aspirations and dreams and everything like that. And that's what gives me the motivation. Because if I know I can connect with them like nobody else can, then my story and my testimony and my statements, whatever I have to say, has to get out there. To enrich people, to make them believe, to make them have faith in themselves, to see what they can become and see what they can achieve. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would imagine it also has tremendous influence over decision makers about second chances that people will be given. I mean, we have that debate all the time in the state. How much should we give to people who've made mistakes? How much support do they need when they come out? You're a great example of what can happen if you do help folks.
And I really agree with that, because even regardless of all the accolades I received and all the awards and documentations and paperwork I have back in my name, you know, when I graduated, people wouldn't hire me.
Is that right? Because of your record?
Because of my record.
Yeah.
I mean, because I would go into an interview, they would be floored. They would love me. I mean, I had people, when I graduated, people already knew about me before I even graduated. Yeah. But as soon as they found out, it started to come out that, oh, he has a criminal record when I was 17, which now is 20 years, almost 20 years ago. It's like, oh, it's hands off.
Right.
You know. So.
Wow. And so, how did you overcome that? I mean, did you just eventually find someone
it's still right now. Believe it or not, it's still a process. I was homeless at a point. I was living in my car at a point. Yeah. You know, I couldn't like support my kids like I want to. We're actually doing. Me and my friend, we're actually doing a documentary based on that now. You know, just the troubles that people who are formerly incarcerated have are reestablishing themselves.
Just re-entering society the way they should.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're a great inspiration. I'm sure lots of people are drawing on that now. So
yes.
That's a success. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.
Eric wants to know.
What does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs.
We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
Love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.